Good evening, members. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Audit Committee. I've got to do the emergency evacuation announcement first. Should we be required to evacuate the building, would you please leave the room via the same door you came in? Turn right and out of the main doors into the car park, which is the assembly point. Please do not delay your evacuation to collect any belongings. Please do not return to the building until given permission to do so by council staff. Please switch off mobile phones or turn them to silent. Please note that this meeting will be audio recorded. Members, when I invite you to speak, please ensure you have one of the microphones in front of you before speaking, as microphones are needed for the hearing loop and for the audio recording. These are switched on already for you to speak, so you do not need to adjust them. Please make sure that the microphone is directly in front of you before speaking. Members, voting will be done on a show of hands in line with the Constitution. I will ask for a show of hands for, then against, any recommendations. Those abstaining from voting will be noted by officers. Agenda item 1. Apologies for absence. We've received apologies from Councillor Andrew Cross. Are there any other apologies, members? No.
Excuse me, I don't think Councillor Lawson here. Would it be better if he moved over this way?
I think it would be.
Sorry, can't you hear?
Yeah, it's not been set up, so I think that Councillor Norman needs to sit on this side of the table. Are you certain? Can you please indicate?
If not, Jack, you can sit here.
You're okay. You can hear me?
Yeah, that's all that matters.
Of course.
Sorry, Chair.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Agenda item 2, substitute members. Councillor David Sharp, welcome. You're substituting for Councillor Andrew Cross. Agenda item 3, non-members attending. Welcome, Councillor Mrs Mason. Agenda item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of March 2022. Are these minutes agreed, members?
Agreed.
Agenda item 5, to receive declarations of interest. Members, are there any declarations of interest? No. Agenda item 6, the annual audit report 2020 to 2021. Debbie Hanson will introduce the report. Thank you.
So this is a report that we're required to present to you, which summarises the conclusion. Is that okay? It seems to be reverberating. Which summarises the conclusion of our audit work. It's slightly different than in previous years when we would have brought you something called the annual audit letter, and that would have summarised the work on the opinion and also the value for money conclusion. This report does the same, but what the members of the committee will not have seen before is the conclusion of our work on value for money. That used to previously be reported in what we called our auditor's results reports, just to confuse anagrams. But due to changes in the NAO code, there's now been more of a separation between the work on the financial statements and the work we do on value for money. So our value for money work is now reported purely through this report that you're receiving today. So hopefully that just gives some background to members. What I'd like to do is just take you through the executive summary very briefly and then just refer you to the section on value for money, because as I said, that's the bit that's really new. The other bits you will have seen before. So in terms of the financial statements, and the executive summary starts on page 8 if you're using the electronic pack. It will be page 3 if you're using the hard copy pack of our papers. In terms of the financial statements, we issued an unqualified opinion on the financial statements on the 10th of February this year. We also concluded that the use of the going concern approach in preparing the financial statements was appropriate, and we also concluded that the financial information and statements of accounts was consistent with the audited accounts. We also didn't have any matters to report by exception in relation to value for money, therefore you had a completely clean and unmodified audit report. We were also happy that the annual governance statement adequately reflected the arrangements the council had in place, and we didn't identify any issues that required us to do any sort of public reporting. We also issued our provisional audit results report in December. Before actually issuing our opinion in February, we considered whether we needed to bring an updated report back to this committee, but as there were no significant changes between our provisional audit results report and our final position, we concluded we didn't need to do that. The one thing we've not yet been able to do is issue the certificate in relation to the audit. And just to explain, the certificate basically says that we've discharged all of our responsibilities under the NAO Code of Audit Practice. One of those responsibilities is to undertake procedures on the whole of government accounts submission that the council prepares on behalf of the NAO. The only reason we haven't been able to do that is because the NAO has not issued the instructions for auditors yet in relation to the 2020-21 financial year. Therefore, although we fully expect that Rochford will be below the threshold and not require any work to be undertaken, until those instructions are issued and confirmed, we can't actually complete that element of our work, submit the assurance return to the NAO, and therefore issue a certificate. Excuse me. I am, however, aware that the instructions have been issued this week. I think there are still some issues with those that we need to resolve, but therefore I'm hopeful that we can issue the certificate very soon, which will be good news and close off the audit completely. I think just by way of context, I think you can tell from the issues that we've reported in here that we identified a number of areas of focus in our work. We didn't identify any issues or problems in any of those areas, and generally the council's accounts are well prepared with good supporting working papers, and we find very few errors. I think the only issues we found were some minor disclosure errors in the accounts, so I think that gives members of this committee hopefully assurance over the quality and robustness of the council's processes for production of the accounts. If I can then just take you to page 18, again using the electronic numbering of the report. This is where we start our Vfm commentary. We're required to comment across three key areas. So we comment on financial sustainability, governance, and then the council's arrangements for improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness. We've included quite a lot of commentary on each of those areas this year because this is year one of the new code, and therefore the first year we've reported under these more detailed requirements. I think we'd just like to draw out that in relation to financial sustainability, COVID's obviously continued to impact on the councils as all local authorities have been impacted. The council has continued to update its MTFS to reflect the impact of COVID and other pressures, and does highlight a gap of around 2 million in terms of the budget by 2015-16. Therefore, we have drawn attention to the fact that it's important that the council continues to drive its transformation agenda, but we do know that the council's had a good track record of delivering savings in the past, but it is important that you keep the focus on that transformation agenda and continuing to make savings going forwards. We also noted there's some greater development of partnerships that the council is undertaking, again, both to improve services but also to achieve efficiencies and savings. And we also note that the general fund balance is maintained at a level of 10% of the net budget to ensure there's a sufficient contingency within that budget. In relation to governance, again, we've noted a number of arrangements there. So the council has robust risk management arrangements in place. It also has performance monitoring systems where you monitor KPIs, etc. And also business plans are produced for key areas. Finally, in relation to arrangements for economy, efficiency, effectiveness, the council regularly monitors its KPIs, also has, as I said, its transformation programme, which is obviously focused on economy, efficiency and effectiveness, and also it has an invest to save programme. So I think we've drawn all of those things out as positive areas that we've noted in our value for money work. And as I say, we've got no issues or concerns to report, but we have included more detailed commentary on the arrangements that the council has in place. I wasn't proposing to say any more about the report, but I'm very happy to take any questions or any comments on anything that's within there.
Members, do you have any questions?
No. I've just got one. You mentioned a date, this 2 million gap.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't get the date.
Sorry, it was by the end of 2015-16. So your MTFS obviously looks forward. Did I say 15? Did I do it again?
Yeah,
that was why it wouldn't make sense.
Sorry. That's what I thought I heard. But
yeah, and I actually wrote down 25, 26. I just said 15, 16.
Thank you. I didn't mishear then.
No, thank you for picking me up on that.
Thank you. So we have no further questions. So, members, is the annual report for the year ended 31st of March 2021 noted? Thank you, members. Agenda item 7.
Stay? Yeah, stay. I am, yeah, thank you.
Sorry, thank you. Agenda item 7, External Auditor Report, Certification of Claims and Returns Annual Report 2020-21. Mr. Mike Porter, Audit and Corporate Fraud Service Manager, will introduce this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Not being an external auditor, I will do my best to take you through the main issues arising from the report. The report summarises the main issues arising from BDO certification of the Housing Benefit Grant for the financial year ended 31st of March 2021. The grant reimburses the council in respect of housing benefit paid out to the value of around £12 million. So in terms of certifying, what does certifying involve? So certifying involves agreeing the entries in the claim to the underlying records and testing a sample of cases from each benefit type to confirm that benefit has been correctly awarded in accordance with the relevant legislation. The report itself highlights two main benefit types. We've got non-HRA, so this relates to people in bed and breakfast accommodation or temporary accommodation. The other allowance that deals with is rent allowance, and this relates to private rented accommodation or housing association. The initial sample testing work is undertaken by internal audit, and the guidance requires that additional testing of 40 plus testing is undertaken where errors are identified. So where internal audit identifies errors in housing benefit payments, additional 40 plus testing is required. This 40 plus testing is undertaken by the Resident Bed and Service. Further, the results of the testing are extrapolated to determine the potential error amount. As reported by BDO, they have amended the claim by £2,097. So in relation to a claim of £12 million, that's a small adjustment to the value of the overall claim. The claim may be amended by a further £19,000 if the DWP is minded to do so. So what BDO have done is basically where they can test the full sample and actually come up with a figure for the adjustment of the claim, they will amend the claim. But where they have to extrapolate, because we can't test the whole population, because otherwise we'd be there all year. So basically they do an extrapolation process whereby they say if that error level continues in the population as a whole, this is likely to be the error rate. So they could adjust the claim by a further £19,000. But that's not something that normally happens, because they can't substantiate that figure. So it's a best guess. So if that error rate continues in the population, if we continue testing, this is likely to be the error rate. But the claim is not normally amended by that figure. So they only amend the claim where they've tested the whole population, all the claimants. So the claim is only going to be amended by £2,097. So I think that's a good news story for us in terms of the 12 million claim. So I'm quite happy to try and answer any questions.
Members, do you have any questions? Councillor Sharp.
Yeah, may I ask how long Ernst & Young have been the external auditor, and have they ever been tested on a competitive basis for their fees, which are going up quite substantially?
In relation to this, Ernst & Young are not the external auditor, that's a BDO.
Oh, BDO, right.
And they were subject to a procurement exercise which we did about 3 years ago.
Right.
So we market tested by inviting, I think, five firms to bid for the work, and they were selected on cost price ratio.
Fine, thank you.
Any further questions? No? So, is the certification of claims and returns annual report 2021 noted? Thank you, members. Agenda item 8, Internal Audit Annual Report 2021-22. Mr. Mike Porter will introduce this report.
Thank you again, Chair. The report provides details of the work carried out by the internal audit team for 2021-22, and also includes the Chief Audit Executive's annual audit opinion that also is included in the AGS. The Accounts and Audit Regulations 2015 require the Council to undertake an effective programme of internal audit activity to evaluate the effectiveness of the Council's risk management, control and governance processes, taking into account relevant public sector internal auditing standards. So I'll start with the opinion, which is provided at 4.9 of this report. So based on the work performed during the course of the year and other sources of assurance, I'm of the opinion that adequate assurance can be taken that the Council's risk management, internal control and governance processes in operation during the year to 31st of March 2022 generally accord with proper practice and are fundamentally sound, although there are opportunities to improve arrangements to enhance the governance framework. I mean, we use the word adequate, so you can take the word adequate to be good. You don't get essentially a substantial opinion. So, you know, adequate is good. It's basically the controls are working well. We may, you know, you might get a limited opinion, but that's not the case in this case. But you're very unlikely to get a substantial or opinion. Adequate is good. Adequate is a good opinion. So it basically says, in essence, it's a positive result and provides confirmation that overall the controls and processes that have been continued to work during the course of the year. So it's a good opinion. So how did we arrive at that opinion? The opinion is derived from the work of the team carried out during the course of the year, and this is highlighted Appendix 1 and from other sources of assurance. The audit plan was completed in full. A summary of the results is provided at section 3.2. In summary, we completed 25 audit engagements. 5 have been assessed as good, 12 as adequate, and 2 as limited, with 2 with a positive direction of travel, and 2 where the nature of the engagement did not facilitate any opinion. And in addition to that, we also undertook 2 grant certifications. In relation to our work, the majority of our work involves the examination of controls or identification of the lack of controls. And through agreed recommendations, we seek to address the control weaknesses. Implementation of audit recommendations by service management has been good to date. 10 recommendations were brought forward into 21-22, and during the year we raised a further 35 new recommendations. There are only 31 recommendations, there are 14 recommendations that have been carried forward into the new financial year. We've implemented 31 recommendations in total during the course of the year. Lastly, I would like to touch briefly on fraud. The Council's arrangements for combating fraud are effective and operating well. In relation to cashable savings identified by the Council, we have identified £591,000 worth of cashable savings identified in relation to fraud work, and these are in the areas of council tax, business rates and housing benefit. Work is underway to develop an up-to-date counter-fraud strategy. As part of this process, a fraud risk register is being completed. This is at an early stage. Work is also being undertaken to update the Council's anti-money laundering procedures as well. Although not mentioned in my report for the year, other noteworthy matters include the transfer of Rochester's internal audit service, that's also recently been discussed at committee, to Basildon Council. So Basildon Council now provides the internal audit service for Rochester. One of the existing members of staff, Becky, has transferred over to Basildon Council, while Jim, who's been a long-standing employee of the Council, decided to retire. I'm quite happy to take any questions in relation to my report.
Any questions?
No? Members, the recommendation is that the Chief Audit Executive's opinion on the overall adequacy and effectiveness of the Council systems of governance, risk management and internal control be noted. Is that noted, members? Thank you, members. Agenda item 9, draft annual governance statement for 2021-22. Naomi Lucas, you'll be presenting this, yes?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So a bit- Thank you, members. So, members of the committee will be aware that in compliance with the accounts and audit regulations, that an annual governance statement must be prepared and presented to members each year for their consideration. And this must be endorsed by the audit committee prior to its certification by the leader of the council and the chief executive, and it's published alongside the council statement of accounts. So just to give a quick overview of what the annual governance statement sort of encompasses, it identifies the key procedures within the council that ensure there is an effective system of internal control and effective governance arrangements upon which you can place your assurance. It reflects the local code of corporate governance that we have in place within the council, and it includes an update on progress made against any actions and risks identified in the prior year AGS. So it also sets out the broad management arrangements across the council, how we've obtained the assurance in terms of governance arrangements, and more generally the policies and strategies that are in place across the council. In terms of the timeframe that the report covers, it's for the financial year 2021-22, but it will also cover the period of 22-23 up until the date at which the accounts are signed off. So it's possible that there may be further changes between the date of consideration tonight and the formal signing off of the audited accounts. And in that case, we would usually request that there's a delegated authority to the chair of the audit committee to authorise any changes of a non-significant nature. However, if there were any more significant changes that came to light during that period, we would of course bring that back to the audit committee for your consideration. I think the actual AGS itself should be reasonably self-explanatory, but I'm happy to try and answer any questions. There's a number of recommendations for noting and agreeing at the end of the report. Thank you.
Members, are there any questions? No? Members, there are 4 recommendations. I will read them out. That the draft annual governance statement for 2021-22 be noted. That it be noted that the annual governance statement for 2021-22 will be reviewed and updated at the time the draft accounts are audited. 3, that authority is delegated to the chair of the audit committee to endorse non-significant changes to the AGS following review by the council's external auditors, and then referred to the joint chief executive and leader of the council for signature. And number 4, that any significant changes to the AGS be brought back to audit committee for review prior to sign off by the joint chief executive and leader. Are you happy to take these en bloc? Do we agree with those? And noted, yeah. Oh, we've got to do a vote. Right. Sorry, I have to do a vote on this. So for item 3 and 4, can you please raise your hands in favour? Thank you. You may lower your hand. That's unanimous. And item number 4? Okay. So that is unanimous. Right, item number 10 of the agenda. Review of the Council's Risk Register 2022-23. Again, Naomi Lucas, the Assistant Director Resources, will introduce the report.
This report is the 6-monthly review of the Council's risk register and is presented for your consideration. The last update was provided in December 2021, and a number of risks have been reviewed on a cyclical basis since that point, which are detailed within the report. So the complete summary risk register is included in Appendix 1, so that sets out all the corporate risks for the Council, and it also sets out the controls in place to mitigate those risks and an assessment of whether the risk is considered to be high, medium or low risk. There is further detail that supports the corporate risk register in the form of service risk registers and other work that happens in the background, which is available upon request. So at the last audit committee, there were a few queries raised about the risk management process, and we've tried to address some of those queries at paragraph 4.3 of the report. So yeah, again, I think that's reasonably kind of self-explanatory, but if anyone's got any questions, happy to try and answer those. And at paragraph 4.4, we set out the actual risks that have been reviewed since December. And members will see that there's only really been sort of minor wording updates to most of the risks. The scores themselves haven't changed. However, that you will note there is one new corporate risk that's been added to the register, which is risk 16, and that reflects the One Team Transformation project, which is the work that we're doing to create a partnership with Brentwood Borough Council. So at the moment, that new risk has been deemed to have good controls and is rated overall as a medium risk given the early stages of the programme, but that will of course be regularly monitored and reviewed as that progresses. Section 5 just sets out the risks which the Council deems still to have a high level of residual risk after the controls are in place. And those risks, again, haven't changed since the last time it was reported. So it's risk 3B, which is health and safety, which I know we've sort of discussed in detail a number of times at this committee. We have been making active progress in terms of some of the control measures in place to try and mitigate that risk, and we have made further progress. However, at this time, the sort of health and safety manager still feels that there is a little bit of improvement to be made in some areas in terms of a consistent application across the council, so that's why that risk remains high. The other two risks which are still deemed to be high are about the balanced budgets, obviously the financial sustainability of the council, as Debbie highlighted earlier, and the value for money opinion of the audited accounts. So that remains a kind of obviously a key area of focus for the council to make sure we can deliver that balanced MTFS position going forward. And also the ability to recruit and retain staff. I'm sure members are aware that not just as a council, but more generally across the country, recruitment and retention is a key risk for a lot of organisations, and that is definitely the case for us as well. So that's why that risk remains high. At section 6, there's just a few emerging issues for members sort of to note and consider in terms of kind of future work around this. And yeah, I think that's probably all I would draw your attention to at this time, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chair. Naomi, I know we've discussed this before, risk 3B and risk 9. Is there have you any timelines when these will actually be removed from risk? I can understand risk 10 because you can never say when you can retain staff, but it's a bit concerning with health and safety and the balanced budget. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Shaw. So, as I mentioned in relation to risk 3B, so the health and safety one, so obviously the score is a combination of the likelihood and the impact. So I think the impacts of that, if there was a sort of significant health and safety issue, would always be high because obviously, you know, it's kind of personal safety in life that's at risk. So I think the impact of a serious incident would always probably be high. So it's about the likelihood of it occurring, and obviously the likelihood is not high, which is why the overall risk is not high. But I think, as I said earlier, that there's good practice across the majority of the organisation. There's just a few sort of pockets of areas where the health and safety manager feels there's still some improvements that could be made, and he's specifically been picking that up and following that up with those individual service areas. So I know that the new chief executive for the council is keen to see that those controls sort of move from fair to high as well. So I think that is something we're actively working on, and we're hopeful that that risk score will come down over the next few months. So yeah, that's all I can really say on that one at the moment. Okay, and on the budget one, I suppose similarly, that because it's such a kind of significant area for the council in terms of the impact of not setting a balanced budget, that the kind of impact score is always probably going to be high. The likelihood, again, is slightly out of our control in terms of what we can do. We're obviously actively trying to manage our budget all the time, but there is a number of factors outside of our control. For example, the inflationary pressures we're seeing at the moment, but also the government's funding regime. So there's only a limited amount of sort of control measures we can put in place to actually manage that risk, which is why that one's still high as well.
Thank you very much.
I can't. Just a question I made, if it's at the right format. I'm just interested when you talk about the recruitment situation. Does this council, and I don't know, does this council have an internal budget for recruiting on training, for bringing people in to train for positions within this council, or is that a separate?
So just to clarify what you mean, so are you talking like about apprentices and that kind of
Training
positions?
apprentices, yeah, bringing youngsters, if you like, youth into the council for substantial positions.
Yeah, so I think we're always open to all kind of avenues of recruitment and retention, and that sort of encompasses a lot of different kind of roles within the organisation, and obviously that it kind of depends on the needs and the sort of the particular team and the candidates out there. But certainly we have training roles within the organisation, and we've within the finance team supported a number of our employees to sort of train up and do their accountancy qualifications, for example. And then once we've done that, we're obviously keen to kind of retain those staff. We have had apprentices, and I think we're actively recruiting a number of new apprentices at the moment. So again, we are looking to sort of grow our own, if you like, as a way of kind of bringing young people and sort of talented people on board. But as I say, it has to be sort of part of a blended recruitment approach in terms of the skills that are needed across the organisation.
Just got a couple of questions to put to Naomi. I think you could plumb down a little bit on a couple of the items based on my experience of reading company reports. For example, on item 9, which is the failure to ensure financial sustainability, I think possibly within there is an investment risk, which I normally see noted on company reports.
I suppose as an authority, at the moment, we're a kind of fairly low risk authority in terms of our investments approach. We don't really have a lot or anything in the way of commercial investments, and our treasury management strategy itself is kind of very low risk. It's all in kind of bank accounts and sort of instant access accounts and that sort of thing. So we don't really have a significant investment risk in terms of our risk profile as a council. Obviously, if that were to change, that would probably be something that would need to be noted more clearly on the risk register. But at the moment, that's not a significant, I would say in my opinion, a significant risk for the council.
Okay, noted. And the other point is, you mentioned earlier about insurance, but I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't actually see anything in the risk register about the adequacy of insurance for property liabilities and construction activities. And surely if there is a failure to maintain adequate insurance or even renew the insurances, God forbid, that would be a risk.
Yeah, certainly, and I think that's probably something that's reflected in our service sort of level risk registers. But I mean, that's almost kind of business as usual for the council. I completely agree that we should have adequate and appropriate insurance in place, and we do. But in terms of the strategic kind of nature of that risk, I wouldn't say that that's probably significant enough to warrant being on the corporate risk register. Or, there's nothing particularly that would give me sort of cause for concern that there's a risk that we wouldn't be adequately insured. So that's probably the reason it's not elevated onto the corporate risk register. But I'd certainly be expected that to be reflected in sort of lower level service risk registers, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. For what it's worth, I think it probably is worth making a record of it within the risk, maybe within item 9 or a separate item.
Okay, thank you, noted.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Milne.
Well, it's actually to ask Naomi. We now have a slightly new capability now because we have overview and scrutiny, right? And as we move on into 22-23, and we've got our new governance arrangements, obviously you probably welcome overview proactively looking at that as it evolves, because then we would then look at it in retrospect, you know, towards the end of the year as part of the work plan, which we could do. Because I can see the council's definitely got a strategy to deal with things that are slightly out of its control, because you've already aligned with Brentwood. You've already brought in Basildon to help us with the audit. And all of those things are areas where it's not so easy as just planning something you're totally in control of, and obviously the outside financial environment. So looking at that, I'd like to meet up and perhaps with Councillor Wilson, and we can do a more constructive job in overview and scrutiny going into 22-23, if that's okay.
Thank you there. But, I think I'd maybe just take that away and have a discussion about the most appropriate forum to have that sort of overall debate. I suppose it depends on what you're looking to achieve out of this, because obviously this committee has sort of been tasked with the scrutiny, if you like, of the risk management arrangements, and that's because it kind of sits more closely with the actual sort of overview of governance arrangements and audit. So there's nothing to stop this committee sort of specifically having a more detailed sort of in-depth review, and I would suggest that this committee is probably the best forum for that if you want to have a look at the overarching kind of risk management arrangements. But certainly where there's individual programs of work that have risks attached to them, like, as you mentioned, the transformation program with Brentwood, I know that those reports are already scheduled to go into review regularly, and they have already been. And certainly I think that you can have that discussion about individual programs of work and the risks associated with them, and then sort of bring that back. I suppose it just depends what you're actually looking to try and achieve. So, yeah.
It's a simplification, perhaps, of the explanation in the preamble to all of this, because there's quite a lot of material here. I did bring my computer tonight, but thank God you printed it off. Yeah, I mean, that was an issue for councillors to understand this. So you've already started on this because we've had the understanding financial statements training, so that's good. So that was the area I was looking at. Yeah. Anyway, that's my view.
Thank you. We have also, I know Basildon themselves ran some training about the actual role and function of Audit Committee and what you should expect from members. I think that's something we're looking to maybe roll out specifically at Rochester and do a bit more training just about what your individual roles are as members of Audit Committee and what your sort of duties and remits are. So I think that's maybe something we'll try and seek to add to the member training schedule for the year ahead, just so you've got a clearer idea about what the responsibilities of the different committees are, if that's helpful.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thank you.
I'd just like to second what Naomi said about the training for Basildon. I was available and I managed to attend the first course that was given, which was really, really helpful. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend the second, so if they were both rerun, that would be an advantage for most people, including myself. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll take that on board and try and organise that. Thanks.
Yes, it's good to have positive feedback for a training course, so thank you. Any further questions? No? Right, members, is the content of the Corporate Risk Register for 2022-23 noted? Thank you, members. And this concludes the business of the meeting. The meeting is closed at 20:09. 20:09.
We can close the meeting, but can I just say thank you to the office officers and putting this report together. It's been very comprehensive and easily understood. So I'd like to thank the officers and auditors for doing it. Thank you.
Yes, perhaps we could still have that in the minutes.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yes, and sorry, I didn't say at the beginning, but I think there are a couple of new faces that may not be. I don't think I've met Paula Mills, so welcome, and sorry I didn't introduce you. Thank you.
Under the new arrangement with Basden, you're actually our kind of chief audit executive now, aren't you? So that's the Paula's coming on to.
So, thank you, members. We can go.